No questions from the audience. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're going to spend the next 30 minutes talking about a shift in optometry that has been going on for the past several years now, and that is private equity versus independent optometry. And my name is Donna Michalecki, and I'm the Executive Director of Optometry Giving Sight, and I'm honored to be on the stage today with these two gentlemen who I consider to be some very dear friends of mine. And they probably both really don't need an introduction, but I'll let them both introduce themselves. So Kurt, how about you go first?
Dr. Kurt Steele. I am in private practice in Newport, Tennessee, with a second location in Greenville, Tennessee. I've written a book, basically, this is kind of part of this, on we're not selling, we're winning. It's basically how to grow a multi-million-dollar, multi-location practice and stay independently owned. This is not anything, by the way, this seems, despite the boxing gloves and the fun we've had, this is not about anything being bad or good. It's just making sure that everybody knows their options that are on the table. I will say this, first of all, I want to say this first. So, I was talking about my book, and I called Vision Expo and said, should we do something with this? And I said, we've actually had this idea of having kind of an equity versus private practice. Who should we get from the private equity side? And for some reason, to show that maybe I'm not that smart, I picked the smartest guy out. Brett Davis, Executive Vice President with AEG. I'll let him tell myself. But if you ever get a chance to hear Brett Davis talk about coaching your team, he has a presentation on coaching your team. Do not walk, run to it. I'm not exaggerating a bit when I say my 31-year career is probably the presentation that has influenced me the most and taught me a lot of the stuff that I put in this book. It came from him. So it's an honor to be up here with Brett. Just one quick thing, the reason I wrote this book though is, when I started doing this 30 years ago, 75% of optometry was privately owned. Now that's kind of an opinion, but I've done a lot of research on that, and today that's kind of 40%. And I think that's a little bit of an alarm. A great example, Tennessee is probably going to pass lasers this year. And my junior partner, Emily Eisenhower, is our legislative chair. 3 weeks in a row, she had to leave for 2 days and quickly go to Nashville to advocate for lasers. And she was able to just do that spur of the moment. And I think that's just something that ownership kind of gives you. So that's kind of what I'm fighting for here. PE is good for a lot of people and in a lot of ways. And a lot of optometrists do a lot of great things that work in PE firms or PE-owned practices, but I still think that we need to have a certain amount of independent practices out there.
Well, Brett, I was going to allow you to introduce yourself, but Kurt took all your time, so sorry.
Well, I agree with everything Kurt already said about me, so we agree on that. But I'm the Executive Vice President of AEG Vision. I've been with AEG Vision since day one. And prior to that, just kind of working my way in the optometry industry. So about 25 years plus in the optometry industry. So my background is optometry, not private banking or private equity, but was introduced to it, and it's been a great career move as we've started AEG Vision and continue to find success.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks, Kurt. So we do know, obviously, there's strong opinions about private equity being the future of optometry versus independent optometry being the heart of optometry. So what we really want to do today, and as Kurt said, all kidding aside, boxing gloves are on that little thing, but this is really going to be a good, lively conversation about, really cutting through the myths about private equity versus independent practice. So with that, Brett, I'm going to start with you. And, like I said, these guys are my friends, so Brett, I know you're not going to expect an easy first question, so I'm coming out hard right off the bat. So I know we've all often heard that, we've said that private equity is bad for independent optometry. And I bet in your career you've heard that just a few times now. But what would you say in response to that?
Yeah, so that is a question we get a lot. Private equity, is it bad for optometry? And my answer is this, and it's depending on where you're at in your career and decision-making process, et cetera, but if we look at kind of pre-independent optometry, if a doctor was ready to exit their practice, the value was typically around 60% of growth. So if you took $1 million practice, they're looking at $600,000 for a valuation of the practice. Then private equity's entered. Now that 600,000 might be 800, might be $1 million, might be 1.2 million. So, just from a financial standpoint, you're looking anywhere from a 200 to 600,000 extra in a doctor's pocket to move forward. Then you move on to the patient care part. right? So, you know, right now as an independently owned doctor, you're head of HR, you're head of IT, you know, you're arguing with the landlord, you're doing all these other things. And we get this feedback over and over again how doctors say, you know, once we've kind of made that move and entered into the private equity world, my day-to-day focus is on awesome patient care. I can spend my morning and my attention is with them, not about a staff issue, a flare-up, somebody took an extra 5 minutes for lunch and the rest of the staff is upset about it, or whatever. They're just focusing on patient care. And then finally, Donna, when it comes to the staff, right? And this was something when I kind of got early on with AEG, this was probably my biggest surprise is how the doctors, when they're considering partnering with somebody like AEG, they're concerned, what's gonna happen to my staff, right? And not all private equity groups are created equal. There's differences, none really, you know, better or worse depending on how you look at it. But the coolest thing is watching the staff have ability to grow. And the staff have options, right? Maybe somebody was, hey, the rest of my career I'm gonna be an optician. Well, now he or she's an office manager. An office manager maybe is now a district manager or a regional vice president. So when you're part of and you're partnered with a bigger group, there's safety in numbers, but there's also room to grow and expand. So, you know, I often go back to doctors. So if you look at, you know, patient outcome, patient care, if you look at the financial aspect of it or your staff, I can kind of make the argument that private equity has been a positive impact in optometry.
Great, thanks, Brett. Kurt, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, actually, I took a little extra time at the beginning, so you know what, I think that was a very good answer. I wouldn't have much to add. I don't have anything I disagree with. Yeah, we'll just move on to the next one.
No worries. Thank you, Brett, for that. Very thoughtful. Those very thoughtful comments. So since that was kind of a tough one, we'll go to a little easier one. So if you could describe in each model a personality type, what would it be? And Kurt, we'll let you go first on that one. What would the personality type be for each model, and why?
I've actually thought of something completely different than I thought I was going to say.
All right, that's all
No,
right.
we're kind of sports guys up here. To me, the independent practice owner is a small town coach. He knows the kids, he knows the families, and he's there for the long term, or she's there for the long term. And it's a long term strategy. Somebody that's part of the community. To me, equity owned is more of a general manager, which is great for systems and great to put in procedures in place. Very smart, knows how to run the numbers. So that would kind of be my answer. To me, the independent owner is like a small town coach.
It's a good analogy. I like that.
General manager.
All right, Brett, how about you?
Yeah, and I would say if you put a personality type on it, very similar to independent practices, you know, there's not really just kind of one personality fits all. You know, having been in thousands of practices throughout the country, there's just different types of practices done better or worse. And I think private equity is the same. And oftentimes if we're meeting with a doctor that's considering partnering with us, you know, we encourage them to learn a little bit about the other private equity groups, who you're partnering with, because, you know, we do look at it at AEG like a partnership, and we want to make sure that they're the right fit with us. I've had some friends that I've been friends with for years, and I've said to them, I don't know that we're the right fit for you. Private equity might be, but it may not be AEG vision. So each private equity group has their own personality, and I would encourage anybody considering that next phase of your career to look and talk to more than one, and most importantly, reach out to some of your colleagues who have partnered with the different private equity groups and see what they like about each one and what maybe they don't like about each one, and make the best decision for you.
Yeah, that's great. Like, just like any organization has its own personality, right? So that's perfect. Yeah, great. Once again, thank you both. So now we all know money talks, right? Show me the money, as they say, right? So Brad, I'm gonna turn this one back to you. So I know it's a question that gets asked probably more in private than in public, but in your opinion, where do ODs actually make more money in the long term, the long run?
Versus staying private or,
exactly.
or exiting.
Yeah,
Great
yeah,
question.
yeah.
So again, this is going to be on an individual basis. So in a lot of cases, a doctor might say, hey, listen, my W-2 looks better staying independent. But if you're looking to build generational wealth or long-term wealth, maybe the time to exit is now. So oftentimes in the private practice, we may look at it, and although the practice is doing really well, you know, there's an old saying, it's not what you make, it's what you keep, right? So, but if a lot of that income is going to servicing debt on the practice, then yes, the practice is making money and the doctor is, but a lot of that income is going to the banks, or the lien holders, or the landlord, or whomever. Versus timing the sale correctly, now you're debt free, now your money's working for you, you're not working for your money. So, you know, one of the big kind of misconceptions about who we meet with is a lot of people are like, well, I'm not ready to talk to you, right? I'm gonna wait a little bit longer in my career. And the average age of the doctor with AEG anyway that we partner with is in their mid to late 40s. Right? It's not the doctor that's 65, 70, whatever, because they look at it and they're like, you know what, I'm ready at this point in my life and my career to kind of let the day-to-day headaches be put aside. I've built a great practice, I'm very proud of it. And you know, one of the things that we take a lot of pride in with AEG Vision is we look at it as we're partnering with the trust and the relationships that practice has built in the community. To Christine, and one of the things independent optometry does so well is that, right? And that's why we're not doing cold starts. We're paying premiums for that trust and that relationship and the thing. So when we meet with the doctor, we say it depends on the timing. You know, if you're still ready to grind, but and maybe your W-2 looks a little bit better, it's independently owned. But when you're ready to kind of become debt-free, let your money work for you, and compounded interest and all those cool things, maybe the time is a little bit sooner than you thought it would be. But again, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all. That's why we have these individual talks, because there's times we'll sit with the doctor and we'll say, listen, we're going to be acquiring in the next year or two also, and we see where you're growing, we see what you're doing here. Maybe we just, you know, grab a cup of coffee or touch base every couple of months, and when you are ready, we're going to be ready for you because we think you're a good fit with our culture.
Great. Kurt, I haven't read your book yet, but I bet this question is intertwined and interweaved throughout this book.
This is the first time I feel the gloves coming up a little bit.
So please answer the same question.
You know, I would just start off with this quote, with all due respect, and actually, I mean, by the way, I'll say this, if I was going to go into an equity group, I would definitely look at them, because this is one of the smartest guys I've ever. And I know Brett's a great guy. I would much rather bet on myself than any equity group. Let me say that again. I would much rather bet on myself. First of all, if an equity group wants to buy your practice, that means there's still money to be made in your practice. And when I looked at it long term, even in my 50s, and I'm not smart enough to know the W-2 or even all that, but you know, I had a financial guy a couple of years ago tell me two smart things. And for people in the audience that are maybe 30s, 40s, and you're starting to grow your practice, it does seem like there's a level where you just can't seem to push through. You know, he said, number one, you know, doctors wait way too early to think about their exit strategy. You need to be doing that now. And number two, that just because you have stopped seeing patients, that you have to sell your entire practice. I want you to think about that for a second. You don't have to sell your practice just because you're done seeing patients. So if you built this great practice, and by the way, you know you have a great business when you could disappear and nobody has to take over, and that's kind of part of the book, is to teach people how to set up a business, not a job or a career, a business, a well-run business. You don't have to be there. You can almost kind of be your own equity group. You know, don't sell it. Sell half of it and just own it, and have great optometrists and great staff come in there. So, you know, that's one thing that I think I kind of want to challenge is, you know, that you have to sell the equity to make all that money. Well, when you sell the equity, and this is a very general statement, but you know, you don't get all your money up front, and you're kind of banking on that relationship is going to work over a 3 to 7 to 10 year period. So you want to make sure that, like, AEG is strong, and I know there's a couple of others that are strong. There are also PE groups that have gone out of business. You know, what happens then? So, you know, before you look at equity, and make sure that you check out the equity group, bank on yourself. I really have a very strong belief that independent optometrists, that I just have just the best colleagues in the world. And, you know, and I'm gonna go back to Emily, and so, you know, and to be able to, Emily, you go to Nashville for 2 days, we don't have to ask anybody, so we can get lasers in Tennessee. I'll hold the shit down here. We can make that decision like that. And that's where I kind of get we need to try to keep as much independent ownership as possible as we can, so those decisions can be made quickly. There's a big difference between clinical autonomy and true autonomy.
Well, that's a great segue to my next question, Kurt. You set that up perfectly. That was my next question, is on the autonomy debate, right? So it's a, definitely, obviously, you started it, it's a hot topic, right? And so, Brent, we're gonna kind of throw this one back to you to start for a minute, but how much clinical autonomy do ODs realistically keep in PE-backed practices?
So, speaking for AEG, they keep their complete autonomy, right? And I kind of touched on this a little bit in the beginning. Their goal is patient care, right? And we've seen the numbers that, if you look at the NPS scores and the patient satisfaction, when they join AEG, those numbers go up through the roof because the doctors are kind of more focused on patient care. Now, specifically, if there's any doctors out there that are doing any kind of specialty type stuff, you know, if you guys know Tom Arnold or Barry Iden, right, two of the top scleral lens practices in the United States are both part of AEG Vision. And that was, you know, their biggest concern is, hey, you're gonna, like, I've built this practice based on the specialty, and I speak Tom Arnold speaks all over the world on the subject. And both of them have both said, you know, my biggest surprise with my scleral lens practice grew. Right, you gave us the resources. We have a whole team of folks, you know, with AEG, we have a optometric advisory council of practicing ODs that help drive it. It's not, you know, knuckleheads like myself sitting in a corporate office making decisions. Our doctors are involved. We're very collaborative with that because we want that autonomy. They're the experts in the lane, not us. We're there to support them and help them grow, whether it's in a specialty category or, you know, we even have a team that's looking at the equipment out here, what's coming down the line, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. We have partnerships with some where we're testing them in our practices and giving that feedback and, you know, being part of the solution to help optometry as a whole grow. Because it's optometry, whether you're independent, work for a chain, or part of a private equity team, you know, high tide raises all boats. So we're a big fan of all of that stuff. And, you know, let doctors be doctors. And what can we do collaboratively as a team to support them?
Yeah, great. And you touched on the equipment piece. I'm going to circle back to that in a minute, but I want to give Kurt here a chance again. And Kurt, you touched a little bit already on sub-control things easily, but tell me a little bit more, tell the audience a little bit more about what you see as differences in the autonomy you have as an independent owner versus PE-backed.
That's pretty simple. I don't think it could take long on this one. So, and I agree with him that, you know, that they have, I'm sure that they have clinical autonomy and collaboration and voice, but there still is a difference between collaboration and voice and true, I guess I could use the word, true autonomy. You know, if I want to go over here and buy a piece of equipment, now I can just do it. You know, I don't have to run up the chain. I don't have to check with anybody. I don't have to do anything. I think it's just that simple. I completely agree that I think, at least I'll speak for AEG, I don't think this is true of all equity, that AEG really does give you complete clinical autonomy. I don't think why would you mess with Tom Arnold on scleral lenses? I certainly wouldn't. So, you know, I completely agree with that. And then you probably would let a Tom Arnold go out here and say, you don't want to buy this, and Brett might say, you know what, go ahead and do that. But in a lot of cases, that's not going to be the case. You're not going to have that autonomy to just make that decision. I talk to vendors at these trade shows and say it's getting harder because a lot more doctors that come to my booth can't just purchase things anymore without checking it. So I've actually heard that from vendors. So to me, I guess that's kind of
Yeah, touch on that, Brett.
You're right with all private equity is not created equal, and Kurt certainly makes a point, but the counter argument to that is there are doctors that are now partnered with us that weren't in a financial position to buy the latest equipment, right? Not all doctors have the cash or the resources to do that, and then when they're partnered with somebody that's as financially stable as an AEG Vision, and the latest equipment is needed in the practice, we provide that for them, right? So there's kind of both sides to that, right? The super successful practices that want to go buy anything on the show floor, great. But the practices out there that maybe have some other financial strains or already have taken on a lot of debt, don't want to get further in debt, we have the ability to go out. I mean, I think our first year in business, we bought 70 or 80 Optimaps at our first 8 or 9 months in business. So we are certainly, you know, for full scope optometry, giving our doctors the tools they need to deliver next level patient care.
I'm actually kind of agree with Brett, and then also so by the way, we hadn't even mentioned it. So West Group, and I got two good friends over there, Dennis and Chris, are sponsoring this, and I'm signing books in their booth right after this. And then also Vision Sources is sponsoring this, as well as AEG. And I agree with Brett in that I think that business education in optometry is just woefully lacking. We get none in school, none whatsoever. And so when he says that, this is a thought I hadn't even thought of until just sitting here now. Brett probably, and AEG provides a lot of optometrists that just could not run a business with the tools to have a successful business. They can see patients. I would also tell you, it's not now, just for all disclosure, I'm a Vision Source administrator. I would say look at it, but if you're an independent optometrist just trying to do this alone, that's just getting so hard to do. You know, I would look at a group in your area to bounce ideas off of, so maybe you could, you know, learn the business tools. You know, somebody that's written a book. There's a lot of great books out there, not just mine. But you know, to give you the tools to get to that financial position where you can buy the equipment yourself and not have to sell your practice to do so.
Kurt, you keep segueing into good next questions for me here. So kind of along, kind of along those. We wanted to set you up, you know. Anyway, along those lines, Kurt, you kind of said talking about, you know, some advice you give people. So what advice would you give to a new OD, completely that would say, what would you tell them about choosing between independent practice and private equity? What would you say to them?
Just not to listen to that it can't be done anymore. That's probably my biggest piece of advice, because you hear that often. And there's a lot of big disconnects in optometry, and it's opened up the door for coaching and consulting. One is, and this is a whole other subject, between building a good team. I hear most doctors say, you know, building a good staff is our biggest pain point right now. But then we interview the staff, they say, we wish we could learn more, wish we could do more. Wish the doctor would listen to me, because I actually have a lot of great ideas. This is just a job to me. I wish the doctor would understand. I would like this in your career. I need you to spend time training me and listen to me and get my advice. AEG probably has places and stuff like that in place to do that. And what I would tell you is that if you're an independent owner out here, if you have a culture problem in your office, and this is addressed in the first half of this book, you got to really look at your leadership style. And you got to take the time to put systems. You can put the systems in place in your practice and the spreadsheets, and you don't have to sell your practice to do it. You can do it, and there's a lot of tools out there to help you do it. And instead of, you know, selling your practice, because there is a very finite time, and we're talking about money too. And this is even true if you sell it, you know, independently. If you sell your practice, eventually that sells, you know, now. You know, what I would tell you is, if you're thinking of selling to an equity group, consider being your own equity group. You know, put systems in place, build a great business, then slowly turn it over to other young ODs and maintain ownership. Maintain ownership for quite a while, even after you quit seeing patients. And that is to me, a much more stable bet, because you own it. You still own it. You still have the ownership inside.
Brett, what advice would you give?
Well, any new grad or any young OD, I would say, you know, follow your dream. If your dream is to be independently owned and kind of build your own business and do your thing, there's, like everything, I mean, every smart business owner is building it for the exit, right? And that might be a retirement, it might be a little bit sooner, depending on the quality of life they're looking for, but yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, I think people think that private equity has a bigger share in this space than they do. You know, when Kurt, you talked about maybe the number of independents dropping out there, I mean, I don't know the exact number, but last I looked, I think it was less than 5% of optometry practices in the United States were part of private equity. But I would also say it depends on your career as an optometrist. You know, one of the things we've had more than one associate or more than one, you know, owner doctor end up saying, hey, I love patient care, but I'm ready for my next challenge. I want to, as an OD, step out of the lane and expand my career and my knowledge base within AEG as a whole, right? Whether that's becoming a regional medical director, whether that's sitting on our optometric advisory board or doing all things. They have options, and whatever your dream is and whatever fits you at this time in your life, chase it. Chase with everything you have, the Kurt's point. I mean, it can still be done, and we encourage it to be done. You know, those are tomorrow's AEG practices.
There you go, exactly. All right, well, we have time for probably just one more question. So what would you say, and Brett, we'll start with you on this one. How about, what would you say in your model that is asked regularly or that just doesn't show up in a brochure, if you will?
Well, I'll give you one that isn't asked that should be.
Okay.
Right, so, you know, when we're sitting with a doctor, oftentimes the doctor will say to us, you know, what questions should I have asked you, Brett, that I didn't ask you, in considering the different private equity groups out there? And my answer to all of them, and Kurt kind of touched on this earlier, is do your homework on their financial stability and do your homework on their culture. Don't just get caught up in the numbers, you know, or the multiples. People will say, well, what multiples are you paying, right? And I always say, you know, focus on the number if you're worried about selling your practice, not the multiples. Multiples can be kind of played with a little bit, but you want to partner with a group that's been around a while, has, you know, hundreds or at least dozens of doctors you can talk to, but most importantly, you know, they have they're built on a solid rock financially. Because, you know, there's some startups up there that maybe stumbled a little bit, and, you know, the really frustrating thing with us is contrary to popular belief, we root for all private equity groups because we're all kind of guilty by association, right? If they have a friend that had a bad experience with private equity, they paint us all with a broad brush. And, you know, that's one of the things that our team does a really good job saying, hey, AEG is certainly not, I wouldn't say that we're the best or better than any private equity group, but there's differences. And just like when we sit with the doctor, you know, we don't really spend a lot of time on the spreadsheets and the numbers early on. We're saying, hey, this is a partnership. We're going to work together. We want to make sure that your staff fits within our culture. And, you know, here's some of the AEG non-private investors, right? The JP Morgans, the Morgan Stanleys, the big ones that are involved in AEG, which puts us in a good financial position. And there's others out there with great investors as well. We're certainly not the only ones, but there's some other ones with maybe, you know, that aren't sitting on as solid ground. So that's what I tell them. That's where you do your homework. And take the time and talk to some colleagues that have partnered with the different ones and get their feedback, because, you know, they're going to tell you, especially with AEG, you know, we encourage our doctors, tell them everything. We're not here to paint rosy pictures. We want to live in the truth. And you know, good partnerships and good friendships start with no secrets and no surprises. And people always ask me, what's the secret success to AEG Vision, Brett, having been there since day one? And I tell them that is we take pride as a company through our leadership team of no secrets and no surprises. We want everybody coming into this relationship with eyes wide open and knowing what to expect.
Thanks, Brett. Kurt, how about you for independent optometry?
You don't want to paint a rosy picture, so I'll start off not painting one easier. Yeah, being a private owner is hard sometimes. I mean, I can remember, I've been doing this 31 years. When I started doing this, I came into a practice, I was grossing $300,000, and I can remember sitting in my truck crying because after I paid payroll and bills, I couldn't pay myself. And I once went 3 months, didn't pay myself. That was kind of the turning point when I started implementing systems into my practice, because I certainly wasn't going to go through that again. Being a leader is tough. There's a cost to leadership. You have to make decisions that even though you're trying to do the best for most, you're still going to hurt some people that you care about. And that's tough. And you're going to be misunderstood sometimes. And you're not going to be there to defend yourself. So there is a cost. I'm not going to candy coat. He's right that running a practice is hard work. But I'll also tell you that I think it's worth it. When I have an employee who loses her home, due to Hurricane Helene, and I've got a second house and I can live there rent free for 6 months. And now that's something in equity down here too. So that's not that's
we
not.
have a mutual friend that just came through a year-long health struggle that is part of AEG, and she was at dinner with her last night. She was in tears,
Y'all been amazing.
and she said, if I was still in private practice, I don't know if I could survive. But AEG Vision said, don't worry about the money, don't worry about the health insurance. You go get healthy again. And that was over a year ago, and she's now cancer-free. God bless.
Tanya Reynolds, go see her speak if you can.
All right. All right. All right, go ahead. One last
I got a
word
couple
before
extra
overtime.
minutes here now. You got 4. Let me have 2 more. Because I do have things. Because I do think here's where there is a little difference on the independent ownership. So it just happened this week. Cobb County basketball. My team is in the Final Four. They're playing right now. And they're in the semifinals. First time they've ever been to the state basketball tournament. And I sent $1,000 today to help feed them because they had to stay in Nashville 2 extra days. Nobody dreamed they would make it this far. I just did it. I didn't have to ask anybody. I didn't have to send it up the chain. This also happened this week. I got a 16-year-old kid who was discovered with his 11-year-old. I had a friend discover these two because he knew somebody. They were discovered in a trailer by themselves. They had nobody. It was a 16-year-old and 11-year-old. And the 16-year-old even had to battle leukemia, and he's raising his 11-year-old brother. And a really good friend of mine bring him to me, and he said, and no insurance or anything. I'm going to give y'all a guess at what I charged him. He was, by the way, like -6 and never had an eye exam. And so I'll take a guess at what I charged him. Now, I know that most practices would probably do that, but I guess what I would end this with is I can make that decision in the exam room, looking that kid in the eye and go. And to me, that's why we need to keep some practices independently owned, because I just think it's better for the community that I can send that basketball team, I can feed those kids so they can live their dreams, and I can help that 16-year-old, and I can do it, and I can just make that decision. So.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Kurt, Brett, thank you both very much. As I think you'll leave today, leaving with, obviously, they're both very passionate about optometry overall. And it's not a one-size-fits-all, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all. You heard that from both of them. And there's pros and cons that each person has to look at for themselves individually. So, again, thank you all for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Just real quick, I'm going to be at the West Group booth. They just